To help set you up for the instructor class, this is a quick presentation about some teaching expectations and some ideas on some teaching methodology. The overall, to start with, I think the things I want you to be aware of are some basic things of learning theory. I'm not going to cover everything I know about learning theory, but just give you a couple key points to be thinking about when you're designing your presentations for the class. And also, I really want you to be able to use this teaching model. Sell, tell, do, and review. We're going to cover that in this presentation, and I'll give you some topics to think about. So during the class, you're going to have two kinds of presentations. One is going to be what we call impromptu. So I'm just going to come up and say, hey, talk about life jackets. You're going to have 2 to 3 minutes, and you have to cover 2 to 3 key points during that. So this is going to be, quick. I'm going to probably right before break, I'm going to say, after break, I want you to talk about something like life jackets. And then you've got to put 2 to 3 key points together and do that on the fly. You also have a prepared presentation. And we're going to say 7 to 9 minutes, and we're actually going to time it. So you have to go a minimum of 7 and a maximum of 9 minutes. And we will time this. I want you to clearly define what you want the students to learn, this learning objective. I want you to apply the teaching model. And bottom line is, to pass this, you have to figure out a way to engage your participants. This is not just talking at them, it's figuring out a way to engage them. So that's kind of the fun part and the challenge of this. And you will get your prepared presentation topics with this presentation. So just a few points on learning theory. We'll just cover those real quick. First off, I think a really key point is this. Adults aren't empty buckets. You just don't throw things at them. You don't throw knowledge and you think everything is going to stick. People just don't learn that way. They don't really learn if you just throw things at them and funnel it into their brain. And we have to figure out how to put the presentation together. And that's a couple of things we're going to talk about here today. So real quick on adult learning needs. I think it's very important to recognize our audience and to know why they are learning. Adults need to know this. They need to know the why. Why are you in this class? What is the reason? We'll talk about that when you first show up, but I think it's very important to recognize that adults need to know this why. It needs to be practically applicable. It needs to fit what they want, the why. And it also needs to be self-directed and they need to be experimentally involved. Again, it's not a one-way thing when you teach adults, especially. It's more of a two-way street. And the last two, I think, are very important that we sometimes forget. The knowledge and the skills that people are coming into the class with, and that they're competent. We need to recognize that with adults. And so we got to recognize that people are coming into your class with already knowledge and skills. You're going to teach them some new ones, but everything that they learned in the past is not wrong. We got to value that and use that. So this teaching model that we're going to put, it's really pretty important to think about this. I like to structure this. I might do, and I'm going to say maybe 10% on this cell. And that's why is this important? It's 1 or 2 sentences of why this is important. One of the things for this presentation I'm giving now, the cell is you're going to be teaching. You need to know this stuff. The tell is what I'm doing right now. And we try to minimize that. Typically, a lot of times people think the lecture, the tell, we got to do a lot. I would minimize that. I'd make the cell maybe 5 to 10% of your presentation, your tell maybe 10 to 20%. And then the do is where we were going to really emphasize in this class a lot more. I think a lot of instructors fail on the do portion. And that is do. I think first off, you do as the instructor, you give a high quality demonstration. You're showing folks what's going on. So you do the do, you're actually doing the demonstration. And then the second do is, so you do first, second, they do. So you must engage them with the content. So if you do a canoe stroke, for example, you give a high quality demonstration of that canoe stroke, and then you have the students actually do the stroke. And then at the end, after they've had a chance to practice and do, then you want to review to check and make sure that they understand. And again, that's going to take a while sometimes for people when this is new content. Well, let's go next slide. Okay, so a lot of this is rooted in theory, and I'm not. You can see different versions of this map all over the place. But knowledge retention. If you lecture, people at best get 5% of the content. So you figure 95% of the stuff I'm saying right now is you're starting to lose. If you're reading it, maybe 10%. And when you demonstrate it, it's still only 30%. So when I'm showing, if people get 30% of what I'm showing, that's great. Where it gets people will remember is when they practice and use it. So the 75% area of retention once you start to use it. The last one I love is teaching others. And the best part about being an instructor, and bottom line is you're learning as you are teaching. So I learned a whole lot more when I had to teach this stuff because I really have to thoroughly understand it. And I think that's going to be the value of this class as you move forward. So I like to sort of tie these together and think about our teaching model and our adult learning needs. So you may want to pause this slide for a second and think about, how these two relate. And so what I'm going to do is give you my answers coming up here. So first off, I think the why is this important, really fits folks need to know why they are learning. So again, we're matching with the model with the learning needs. This tell, which is actually interesting, it looks like my arrows moved a little bit on here. The tell doesn't really fit as much in some of these adult learning needs. Maybe the practically applicable is where it's going to be, where the tell comes in. But the do, and I probably should put a bigger arrow here, is really to be the self-directed and experimentally involved. To have their knowledge and skills, acknowledged and to be competent, I think this covers all aspects of the teaching model. So throughout that teaching model, we got to make sure, again, we are recognizing people are coming in with expertise. So for your presentation and designing your class, I'm going to give you a few tips on this. So first off, on the cell, I think it's very important to have a good learning objective. We want participants to know, or what do we want them to know or understand or be able to do as part of this presentation. So really think about when they walk away, what do they got to do? Okay, what do you want them to be able to do or know? So for your topic, I'd like you to really clearly identify 2 to 5 items that you want them to be able to either know, do, or understand at the end of your presentation. And then ask yourself, how will you know if they achieve those 2 to 5 items? So again, identify 2 to 5 key points that you want them, that you're going to emphasize and you want them to know at the end of your presentation. On the tell, the hard part is these are big subject areas. Everything we do could be hour-long presentations. It could be day-long classes. You're going to have 7 to 9 minutes. So you need to prioritize the information to what do they need to know, what is nice to know, and then where to go for additional information. That's where references, who to talk to, all of those things. But this is really about prioritizing information. And so you don't want to tell them everything you know. You want to tell them just what they need to know. And for your presentation, I want you to ask yourself, what do the students need to know and what can they absorb? And I think that's really important. What can they absorb rather than try to give them, overfill this sponge? And then what is the minimum you can cover to meet the objective? I love this thought of thinking about not the maximum speed, but what is the minimum? So really think about when they walk away from this class, what is the minimum that you can cover so that they can understand this? Now, do is going to be really important. And to me, when your presentation, I really want 50 to 60% of your presentation a do. And so that's either you doing this high quality demonstration, the students practicing the technique or some other hands-on activities. So if you're talking about a paddle stroke, you have a paddle in their hand and they're in the water and they're actually doing this. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about how to do this, first the demonstration that you do, and also how students do this. And there are a lot of other ways you can do this. You can have them share with a partner or a small group. You can give them a game or a worksheet. I love that, this is kind of one of the ideas of you give them a checklist and you have them go through the checklist and ask questions about that or some sort of game. The other way you can do it is you can teach back. You could have them read something and then teach it back to the class. There's a variety of examples. I'm really good at thinking about this through thinking about other examples. So if you struggle with this, talk to me and we can talk about brainstorm some ideas that you can do. And then for your presentation, again, I would like you to have at least one way that the student's going to interact with the content. You get bonus points for engaging them multiple times throughout the process. So if you're hitting them multiple times and getting them to do things throughout your presentation, cool. That's what I'm really after. Bottom line is just saying that, are there any questions? And then waiting, that doesn't count. Okay, that's a good thing to do, but it's not what we're after. We're after getting people to engage. This is a sport. They want to be able to engage. They want to be able to touch and feel, and we'll really cover that. And then, again, going back to the model, okay? So it's sell, tell, do, review. And now we're back in the review phase. And we want you to tie that back to your learning objectives. So when you're thinking about up front, what are the 3 to 5 key points that we want students to be able to walk away with? We revisit those and we tie that, make sure that we're hitting our learning objective. So at the end of this presentation, I want you to be able to put together a presentation. That's kind of my take home. And then for your presentation, again, you review your key points, and the more fun or the more creative you can do for your review, the better off we're going to be. You don't need to just regurgitate the 5 points over and over again or the 3 points over and over again. Find some fun way to do that. So for this presentation, I'm going to give you an example. We're going to discuss this in our class, probably one of the first days. And so here's the example. You show up for a canoe trip. The trip leader gets everyone in the circle, says, hey, get comfortable. We're going to talk at you for a while. They give a 30-minute talk while the students are sitting there on their chairs. It's the safety talk, the paddle instruction, river reading, all of that. Your challenge and your review for the material I just covered is how do you make this more effective? And we're going to test your knowledge and we'll be able to review this presentation. So this is really quick, as hopefully to give you a little bit of foundation to get started. And I look forward to talking with you more in the class. Take care.